Hello everybody, hope you guys are all enjoying your Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Today we're going to be looking at your next storm system, which is going to be entering parts of the Northeast within the next 24 to 48 hours. And that's when, really, once it gets onto shore, it's currently offshore of Baja California. Once it gets onshore, we'll have a much better idea of where it's going to track. Right now, this is just a preliminary outlook and looking at this system. There isn't a lot to talk about in the weather, really talking about it weather related. So we're going to be focusing on this system. This system is going to be about 3 to 6 days out, 3 to 5 days out, right around there. So this, you do have to take a lot of this with a grain of salt. That is going to change, and I will be making my official forecast coming out right around Tuesday or Wednesday time period. So definitely be on the lookout for that, and I will be updating that many times as we do get closer to this event and we do get more updates on this storm system. Now, here is the current National Weather Service, and you do have some wind chill advisories over parts of North Dakota, Minnesota, as well as Montana. As well, you have some in Iowa and also into northern Missouri, as well as parts of the central Appalachians. We also have some freeze watches. This is your first freeze for most of these areas in northern Florida and southern Georgia. And then we also have some winter weather advisories over northern New Mexico. So it's a pretty quiet day, and it is going to be a very dry week for most of us in much of the country, except for that one system that moves through. It's going to be a very dry week. That's pretty much the only system that does look to come through. Now, here's the GFS model, and here's what it's showing. Here's your current 1042 high pressure system that's really bringing in all this cold air. Wind chills are down to about negative 20 to negative 40 degrees in some of these areas this morning. And that is all because of this very cold high pressure system that's dragging in all this cold air, and that's sinking far to the south. So that's what's bringing all this very cold air. And it's also increasing wind gusts. So that's what makes it feel much colder outside. Now, here is your system. It's currently off Baja California. This is your system right here. There's kind of a couple closed isobars, which indicates a low pressure system. So it's very scattered. There's many weak low pressure systems, but this would be your main low pressure system. Now here's all your moisture ahead of this streaming in, and you have a very strong Pacific jet stream that's going to be streaming in all this moisture into parts of the United States, and it's going to be meeting up with this cold air from this high pressure that's kind of dipped down, kind of like this. So as this system moves into all that very cold air, it's going to, of course, generate some snowfall. Now, here's the current GFS model, and this is just one model, and we're going to look at three models, the GFS, the European model, and the Canadian model, and kind of trying to make up our minds on what's going to happen here. So, the GFS is being a bit wonky today, and I'm not going to trust it too much, so we're going to briefly go over this because GFS hasn't been too accurate today. I really don't see this happening, especially this rain on the western side of this. I think that's going to switch over to some snow. So this is going to move in. This will be by Wednesday, according to the GFS. And then by Thursday, it's raining all the way up until Minnesota and Iowa. And now it's starting to snow a little bit. You have two low pressure systems. You have one all the way down in the Gulf. That's providing energy for the southern component. Your northern low pressure system is the one that's dragging in all that cold air. So this cold air is making it all the way south into parts of Mexico, even seeing that colder air. Now, here, as we get into your Saturday, it starts to move into the northeast. If we can get a coastal low pressure to form, then you will have enhanced precipitation over the coastal northeast, whether that be in the form of rainfall or snowfall. Now, you'll probably have some snow on the onset of this and also on the backside of this over much of the northeast, but then it's going to quickly change over to rain for most of you in the coastal northeast, and it'll stay snow for the interior, and then it'll switch back to snow at the end for a brief time, and that would be by Monday is when it's departing. So your big days of snowfall would be between Friday and Sunday for anywhere from the Midwest to the Northeast. Here's your total snowfall from the GFS, and I would increase these totals over parts of the Midwest. I'm thinking more over these areas and a little bit less over these areas, so I think it's a bit overdone over parts of the Northeast. Now, here is the current European model. Now, here is your first piece of energy, and this is the same that the GFS showed. Now, we are pretty certain on where this energy is coming from. It's coming from Baja California. It's going to make impact and on land by Tuesday morning. But as we continue this, Where it gets more uncertain is where does this freezing rain snow line set up. So according to the European, by Wednesday morning is over here. If you remember, the GFS had your freezing rain line right around here, and that was by Thursday. So the European model is much further or much faster with this system, and it continues to bring that snow. It starts to slow down as it gets into Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, and then it starts to continue to kind of ramp up in its speed until it hits the Northeast, and then it slows down again, and it brings several days worth of snowfall to parts of the interior Northeast. Now, here's your total snowfall out of this event, and you see this is what we would call an Appalachian runner. That's that second low pressure system that kind of formed at the Gulf Coast. That's what we would call an Appalachian runner. It runs up to the east of the Appalachian and the Appalachian Mountains, and it brings a lot of snowfall to the Appalachians and very little to areas east of the Appalachians. And you're also meeting up with this secondary low pressure system that looks to dump 2 to 6 inches, according to the European, over parts of the central and northern United States. Now, here's the Canadian model. Now, this is a model that I would rarely look at to kind of set a trend. I wouldn't look at this model if every other model is disagreeing and this model is showing something crazy. I really wouldn't trust this model. I'm only looking at this model today because really this is a good indication if the European or the GFS is being accurate. It's a good model if the Canadian model matches up with one of these models, the European or the GFS. I have increased accuracy with that model. That model tends to be a little bit more accurate when we have two models. So if this Canadian model is siding more with the European model, then I'm gonna go and trust this one a little bit more because there is two models against one model, and sometimes it is hard to see whether the European or the GFS is being a bit more accurate. So that's what we're looking at the Canadian model for today. So here's your low pressure. Again, out of Baja California, you have a couple weaker low pressure systems kind of dotted around here. So those aren't your main low pressures. That's just going to enhance the system. You have all this moisture. This is your system. Your high pressure, this blue line indicates your freezing point. Generally, your freezing point is this blue line. And if you're in the red lines, that's really you're above freezing. So you're seeing these below freezing temperatures meet up with all this precipitation. So this is leaning more to the European model, which leads me to believe that the Europeans being a little bit more accurate here. So as we continue this, you're starting to see that snowfall break out over parts of the Midwest and Great Lakes. And as we continue this, it really starts to just spin up as it gets right around the Great Lakes states. And as we continue this, rain for the coastal Northeast, a lot of snow for the interior Northeast, and that would be by Monday, and it kind of exits. So you see, it was very similar to what we did see out of the European. Now, I'll actually switch back to what the European was showing. Here's what the European was showing. Here's what the Canadian is showing. So it has a lot of snowfall over the central United States. That's what the European showed, but it kind of overdoes this amount, I believe, that I don't think you're going to see a foot and a half of snowfall out of this event. I just don't think it has enough strength or moisture to really pull that out. But definitely, I think the placement of this is okay. I think it would really be closer and further north, kind of running up the Appalachians as well. And I think the central U.S. snowfall, I think it would be more positioned kind of like this, a little bit further to the north. But that is kind of we are very far out, really. So this is just a general preliminary outlook on this event, and we will definitely get more information as we get closer to this event. This event is spanning from really tomorrow, which would be the 21st, all the way until about the 27th or the 28th. So very cold, very hard weather forecast to predict because we are still about 7 days out from this event in some locations, depending on where you are. So it is still very far out, and we have a lot of time for this model to change. This could shift 100 miles south or 100 miles north in just a couple of days. Even in one model run, it could change that far north or south. So there is a lot of discrepancy and a lot that can change within this storm system. Anyways, guys, that is going to wrap up the video. Please consider subscribing and leaving a like on the video, as well as turning on notifications, because we do these videos daily. Anyways, guys, that was Eli Weather Guy, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.